tape too. I wonder if I.
Yeah.
I've got footage scales on the tape recorder, haven't I? Those things have tape footage scales on them?
Yeah, if you make sure that you get them all the way to 0 when you start the tape,
Yeah,
and then it should wind up from there.
okay.
So just make sure you're always reset to 0 when you're,
When
you
you
know,
start-
all the
when
way
you get-
rewound.
Well, set the zero at the beginning of the roll,
Right.
yeah.
Because sometimes you'll pop them in there, and if it's not rewound, then you rewind it and it'll go to like negative whatever.
Well, or otherwise, I
So
think
you
an
just have
easier
to
way to
reset
do
the
it
counter.
is, either way to do it, if I've already taped some, and I'm ready to type another one, I take a look and see what it says on there, and say it's 110 feet. So I start this right down 110, and I then take
Yeah.
right down what's at the end of it,
Yeah.
and then figure how many
Check.
feet that is.
Yes, yes, yes. Sounds like a good thing.
Want that chair out there, I guess, yeah.
So should we turn this on?
Yeah, you just have to turn it on. Right, Pete, right?
Oh. Light balanced.
How's that look, the light, okay?
That's good. Turn it for a sec. Where's my white balance?
How's that look? Does it,
It's good.
the scenery look all right?
Yeah.
How much side lateral room have I got here?
Pretty good.
Was I inside of all this movement?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I keep it inside your elbows.
Oh my gosh, okay.
Ha! Wanna do that?
Haven't any spinach on my teeth, have I?
Not that I can see from here.
Good.
Well, I don't think.
What about the volume? You want to check that out?
Yeah, I can fix this light. I need a little bit closer. Is that hot or not? All right.
No, doesn't bother me. I just wondered, isn't that overpowering me now?
Oh no, because your background's really bright because of outside.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Okay. Well, what about this side of my face?
it looks good. You actually. You're gonna have two colors of light on your face.
Two colors, from this and from here. Oh yeah, I know that. We've had that before.
There.
We did it outside against that back door there when we had this against the direct sunlight.
Yeah.
All right, now,
Okay. Was there? You act like you have something specific you want to talk about.
no,
True? Oh, you don't. Okay.
no. No, I was just talking about these ideas I had of how I was going to catalog that stuff and whether it do you any good. I don't do anything that won't help you, but I want to do everything I can that will help you.
Right. Yeah, that'd be great. I
Okay.
mean, that would help. That'd be great. Well, shall we?
All right. You
I'm
want
gonna make this pretty easy on you today.
to get voice?
I did when you were just saying.
Oh,
the
all
last
right,
thing you were
okay.
saying. I'm gonna make this pretty easy on you today.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm going to ask you, today I want to go over, like I mentioned at the end of what we were doing last week, talking about things that were going on at the time period, like the late 30s,
Yeah.
just before
Yeah.
the war,
Mhm.
those kinds of things. But I don't need you to remember dates and names and things like that. I just kind of want how you felt about things that were happening
In
at
general,
the time.
yeah.
You know what I
Okay.
mean? From your perspective, how did you see it?
Yeah.
Not how we know about it now, because
Mhm.
you know now we have history books written about it, and they may or may not be how you remember them or how you
Yeah.
perceived them at the time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So I just wanted to ask you about that, and I think we talked about the Depression a little bit. Why don't you tell us kind of how did you see the country come out of depression? I mean, we know that the war was kind of the biggest thing that got the country out of depression, but
True.
before the war, did you see the country coming out of it, or was it looking bleak did everyone think this is how it was going to be from now on, or
Before the war,
Yeah. like around the time you left the band and
well,
moved to
I'll tell you,
California?
it depends on the individual, really. I'll take myself, for example. The Depression was horrible. While I was back in Davenport, I was working a little and off. I was working in the U.S. Engineering Department, and I'd get laid off and everything, and it'd be a long dry spell. Helen was working, and she'd get laid off. Nothing was permanent in those days, and it was really tough to get along. But as I told you before, it was also the time of my life when people were the most friendly and the most helpful and the most friendly, helpful. It'd give you things. We did the same thing. If we had something else and somebody was worse off than me, we'd give it to them. Everybody was like that. And you got by the cheapest way you could, in all ways. And that went on as long as you weren't working. But then we came to California in '40, and of course I couldn't get a job here. It was still depression for me until I got a job at Lockheed. And all of a sudden I got a paycheck. It wasn't much, but it was a paycheck. And all of a sudden everything looked rosy. It's just amazing what a difference in making a person, what their own status is. A lot of the rest of the people are having the same tough luck, not getting anywhere, anything, and were suffering and called it depression, but I was out of it. And so my view of the depression changed immediately with the job, and that's the way with everybody else too. Because without an income, it's a horrible thing, particularly if you have a family. You have to depend on somebody else. But there was no government help anywhere. Unless, during the Depression, the government, the federal government, had PWA, Public Work Administration, and Work Products, something administration. They hired men, and I think it was more or less on a temporary basis, but a lot of things were done during the Depression on that basis where the government is paying for it, that we still have in our lives today. I played golf on a couple of golf courses that were built during the Depression with the WPA laborers. Roads, highways, parks, things of that nature that the public used were done by WPA or PWA labor. And so that helped those people out, those that had it. And I was still trying to be a photographer, and I hesitated to try anything else because I was afraid I'd get into something else. I'd get away from photography. I was just getting started in it, and I was really gung-ho. And so I was going to say it's possible. It was possible I could have gotten some other jobs, but I'd pass them up because I'm looking for a photo job. But after a while, I think I mentioned this before, I was helping my uncle build houses and hauling bricks for him and mixing mortar and things like that. I'd lost my pride and my ambition by that time. I'd take anything I could get, you know. But fortunately, when I got back out to California, I got into photography at Lockheed.
And you knew that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Did you ever, this is a little bit off the subject, but did you ever have aspirations to do something else besides photography?
Well, when I got into photography, I was for photography. But other times in my life, I did. You know, I told you that I flew when I was 16, 17 years old. And at that time, boy, that was it. But I didn't make any money, and I wanted to go out with girls, and so I had to get something that would get me some money, so I went to work for my granddad. And he paid me quite well. He paid me like a man. And so that was just great. But and furthermore, I lost my interest in flying. And not because I didn't think at the time that I'd go back to it, but in the meantime, music got a grab on me. And so I was gung-ho for music. And stayed right with it until I was in the band and out of the band, until I quit in 1936. It was all music. And then photography. Let's see, well, I'll tell you this. I think off and on throughout my life, I wanted to be a writer. And I think if I had it to do over again, I would have put all my emphasis on that talent. Because for a couple of reasons. When I did write something and got it published, boy, that was you just felt great. You knew you were appreciated. And also you knew that you were capable, that what you wrote was interesting to somebody else. But I didn't know how to start getting into it, and other things when I was younger had a little more glamour. Photography had a lot more glamour to it than sitting punching at the typewriter. And so consequently, at that age, why, hey, photography is it, you know, so it overshadowed the writing. But I've always wanted to be a writer, and I'll tell you this, if I had it to do over again, that's the way I would go. Because my gosh, if you're good, and I'd have to be good, you make loads of money. These days, my gosh, you write one book and make $1 million. It wasn't always thus, but it was always good pay as compared to other things. And you worked at your own time when you wanted to, and you could live anywhere you wanted to. You could live on the Riviera if you were making enough money, and it didn't matter. Where you weren't tied down to a certain place, like if you had a normal job, you know, you're stuck there.
So anyhow, we were talking about the depression.
Well, you in photography, you get published and things like that.
Oh yeah.
Did you,
I
did you not find the same satisfaction?
I got a lot of satisfaction out of that. Yeah, I did quite well in photography. I was a main sports photographer in the whole LA area. I had most of the accounts. I had all the racetracks, and I had the LA Rams, and I could have had the Dodgers. They asked me when I came out whether I was interested, and I didn't give them an answer. I was flattered that they would ask me. But anyhow, I mentioned it to Al Wesson, who was publicity director for Hollywood Park, who was one of my accounts, because in those days, each different sport was battling to get their pictures and their stories in the newspaper, you know. And it was, so if I went to work for baseball and started getting baseball stuff in there, and Al was trying to get his pictures in there, and here Stein's got a credit in there in the space that he thought he was going to get, pretty soon he's going to say, hey, what am I paying that guy for? I'll get somebody else. So I realized that, and so I tried to sound him out on it in a very subtle way. I didn't tell him they'd asked me. I just said, how'd you feel about it if I took it? And he said, well, I don't think I'd be too happy about it. So I didn't take the Dodgers. But anyhow, I had enough sports there. I was busy every month of the year in one way or another. Racetracks ran most of the year, and then football was over all of the fall and into Christmas. So I was busy with all that. Well, as a fact, I was busier than that because I had a commercial part of my business too, even a wedding part. And so I had a lot of things going on. And photography was interesting. I would say this, short of writing, I was just about as happy in my occupation as I could be with photography, because I had a lot of the freedom that I had in writing, except that I couldn't go anywhere. Well, a lot of photographers can. A lot of photographers shoot scenics all over the world, you know, and make a bundle. And I could have gone that route, but I didn't. I got started into sports, which was great because it paid well, and furthermore, it gave you a certain amount of notoriety, and they free food.
That's all that really matters.
Yeah, yeah. It was, and you got in on all the parties and everything else. If you're in publicity or in sports, there's a lot of parties because they're always partying the press or taking them somewhere or something, you know, just oiling them up so they get more stuff in the paper. See, so I was always stringing along with that, you know. It was fun.
But you've always looked back thinking you maybe could have been a little bit more satisfied being a writer than a photographer.
I would have. I resented, if anything, I just resented the freedom that a writer would have that I didn't have. I mean, I was stuck, boxed in. L.A. was my territory, and down to San Diego because we had the Del Mar track too. That was near San Diego, where a writer could. Well, he'd have his own. He could do things at his own time. I'm not lazy. I think as a writer, I'd work just as hard as I did as a photographer, but I could do it more at my own time. I could write in the middle of the night, for example. And in fact, I used to like to write at the middle of the night. When I wrote arrangements for the band, I always did it in the middle of the night because there was no other noise. Because especially that's particularly necessary with music because you got to hear all this stuff in your head and put it down on paper. And so if you got conversations or other music in the background, it's murder to try and do that. So I'd write in the middle of the night where there's no sound. It's great. And I could have done that with writing. I think I'd have liked that. It'd given me my days to play around. And another thing too is I read that from a number of the writers that they'd worked 4 hours a day. But anyhow, when I did start writing, my first serious long writing happened when I was up in Oregon on the beach, or when I had the cabin on the beach. The cabin house, it was on the beach. Not on the beach either, on the lake, Sutton Lake. And I decided, what happened was we had a tornado. And it was rough, boy. It come in off the ocean. It really tore down a great big tree of mine, did some damage, superficial. My dock, I had a dock out there. That thing was twisted and bent up. And anyhow, it was 4 days that there was no electricity. And so I happened to take my old Coleman stove from camping. I had kept that all these years. I always liked that thing. And I still had kept it, and I had it out in the attic, or out in the garage. So I brought that in, and that's what we cooked on, and also helped to warm the house with. All the time that was, but anyhow, the reason I got on that, I was thinking of something to do during this time that all the electricity was off and everything else, and I'm going to write, see. So I no sooner sit down at the doggone typewriter, I realized it's electric. I had a IBM Selectric typewriter with a little ball on it, like that. Good typewriter, but it didn't work without electricity. But anyhow, since the idea of writing just stuck with me after the lights came on, and so I started writing. And I was talking about what made me think of this, is I was talking about how nice it was to only work 4 hours a day. But I'll tell you, when I got into that, writing that novel, I became so engrossed in this thing. I was no longer living up in Oregon. I was living with these people. I was an observer of this thing, and I'd forget to eat. I'd hate it when the phone would ring, and I spent most of my waking time working on that thing. It was so, and it was fun, really fun, and I could see right then that, boy, I was right. I should have been a writer. But the thing is about writing is it's the most antisocial thing that you could do. Right. Photography, on the other hand, is one of the most social things you could do, which was a plus in my department, for me. But writing, you're buried. You don't want any interruptions. You want to sit there on that typewriter and just go. Don't want anything to interrupt, and so therefore you're like a hermit. And when I see some of this woman, I can't think who it is now, that put out hundreds of books, romance books. Pretty much, she raised about 6 or 7 kids, and was married 4 times, and she's still putting them out. And I don't know how old is she. She's probably better than 50 or so, and many of them. There's movies made of them. I'm not good at names, or I could remember a name you'd recognize. Danielle
Steele.
There you go, Danielle Steele. And how she put out all of that with all of the kids and everything else, I don't know, but she certainly did. But she writes fast, because I wasn't a fast writer. I made too many mistakes. I wrote fast, but in writing fast, I made mistakes. So I would have to go back and correct them sometime. Maybe not on that copy, but next one I would. So that slowed me down. It took me about twice as long to type as if I would go slow and methodically hit the right keys. See? But I would try and keep up with my mind. My mind is thinking. I'd try and get the stuff down, the same thing, and I blew it. In fact, I still type the same way, too fast and with a lot of mistakes. I've got to take time off. My throat's climbing up.